I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. Welcome to today's episode. This is our first guest of the new season. I'm calling it season 3 because this is my 3rd year of having the podcast. So here we are, season 3. And today's guest is Todd. And you probably know him as the Bear Quilter. He quilts on his TikTok and he's got a YouTube, and you've probably seen him in his boxers because he quilts in his underwear. So I just really wanted to chat with Todd because I met him briefly at QuiltCon. I got really nervous and I ran away before talking to him, or we said hello and I was like, I know who you are. Anyway, it was embarrassing. So I thought, hey, let's talk like adults. And that was cool. So he agreed to join, and we had a great time talking. I got to know more about him, about how he started quilting, and it was just great. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and let's get into it. Hey, Not Your Granny's Quilt Show fans, thank you so much for being here. I love you guys so much, as you know, because I tell you all the time, but I super duper mean it. And since I know you love me and the show too, head on over to the merch shop, because you know what? I put everything on sale. I want you guys to be able to get your hands on some merch, and I thought, what better way to mark the new season than to have a sale on the merch shop. So head over to nygqs.printify.me to go grab some Not Your Granny's Quilt Show merch today. And now on to the episode. Welcome to the show, Todd. How are you doing?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited too. I know we mentioned we briefly met at QuiltCon, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't get a picture. I didn't ask any questions. I was just like, yeah, I know who you are. And then I ran away and I was like, ah! So it's good to
Yes.
actually get to talk to you.
Yes, thank you. I think QuiltCon is like that for a lot of people. It's like that for me, certainly, when I meet somebody. I'm like, that's great. I'm out of here.
Yeah. Like, great. I have to go. Yeah. It's almost like self-preservation. Like, I've got to go before I
Mm,
embarrass myself. So,
right,
you know, it's,
right.
it's,
But yeah, I'm super happy to be here. I've listened to the podcast several times, so I'm very
oh,
excited. I was excited to get the invite.
oh my gosh, that's so flattering. Well, I'm so excited that you're here, and I can't wait to to know more about you, because I follow you and I've seen your socials and stuff, but I just want
Mhm.
to learn more about you, and I love, hearing from people one-on-one. So first, what I always ask everybody is how you even got into sewing and quilting in the first place.
By accident. I
Mm.
mean, so it's a little the full story is that my grandmother and my mother were both sewists, and both of them worked for clothing companies and then for outerwear companies. When I was a kid, they both worked for Slalom and Bogner, who do kind of ski wear.
Mhm.
Um, and so they were both very kind of big into sewing. They sewed a lot of our clothing and a lot of our home deck stuff. And so I learned early, 10 or 11, how to use the basics, how to do the basic things. So on buttons, hems and pants, fix a cuff, those kinds of things. Um, my mother had 4 boys, and she taught all of us how to do those things. I'm just the only one that it kind of stuck with.
Mm.
And then 6 years ago or so, a friend of mine asked if I could make a beach blanket for her. And I was like, how hard could that be? Um, so I did it, but I didn't know how to finish it. And I went down the YouTube rabbit hole, and discovered, you know, actual quilters that were more like me than I thought existed out there. So I started following people like Angela Walters and um, Leah Day, and some of the more modern quilters that I did had no idea existed in the world. Um, and that's it. Like, took me down that rabbit hole, and it's been that way ever since.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like you have a little skills and then you start seeing stuff that like piques your interest and you're like, wait a second. And then it's like the rest is history, right?
Mhm. Yeah. And it's weird how fast it happens. And I
Mhm.
feel like that's true every time I talk to somebody, how fast kind of this kind of thing gets into your system, and then all of a sudden you have 1,000 yards of fabric, and
Yeah,
yeah.
100%. Yeah. I know my mom and I were just we always just like freak out because we both have so much fabric,
Mhm,
but then we always end up buying more and or seeing something we just can't live without. And we have been separating out like because Sweet Pea Design Company, my long arming company, and I make custom quilts too. Um, we're s- I'm I'm acquiring the business from my parents' house. So like I will be the sole owner now. And so I'll be running it out of my home and just separating out everything that was just my mom's versus the businesses. She
mhm,
was like, I didn't realize I had so much fabric still. Because it was all just in bins underneath the long arm.
mhm.
And then when we had to actually separate the bins from like what was Sweet Peas and what was just hers, she still has so much fabric. And I was like, you have a problem. She's like, it's not a problem. It's a love. It's a passion. I'm like, okay. Well,
Yeah. It is, someone told me one time, and I believe this is true forever and ever. I will believe this is true, that collecting fabric and using fabric are very different hobbies. Um,
absolutely.
and so
Absolutely.
I believe myself that to be true, so that I don't haunt myself with the sheer volume of stuff I have acquired over the years.
Yeah. It's hard not to buy new stuff all the time because so many cute fabric
Mhm.
lines come out all the time. And trends change and you want to be on trend, and especially when
Right,
you're making social media.
right.
So,
It's it is interesting. Because it's also like an archaeological discovery as you dig through your fabric,
yeah.
um, to
Yeah.
see kind of where you were 3 years ago in your journey and your aesthetic to where you might be today.
Mhm.
Um, so I think at some point somebody's going to have to like write a book about that.
Right. Yeah. It would be interesting to, I don't know, like almost um like an inside look at people's
Hmm.
collections of fabric. Like what have you acquired? Where did you get it? When did you get it? Just because it does tell a story about a person, I think.
Hmm.
And if you're a stashless wonder because you just use every scrap you ever make, then I mean, I have nothing but respect for that because I can't seem to do it. And you know, and some people
No,
have piles and piles of fabric and like you're saying, 1,000 yards of fabric later, you're just like, how did I get here?
right. And I worked for early on in my quilting career. I worked for a quilt shop for
Mm,
like literally like 3 hours a week. It was just long
mhm,
enough to get a discount. Um, and if you work in fabric, as you know, if you
mhm.
work in fabric in any way, shape, or form, you see it, you have it. Like,
Yeah,
this would be perfect. I must have this.
yeah,
Um, so I've tried over the last year, I've tried not to purchase anything that doesn't have a specific purpose. I fail every day
me too.
doing that, but I try real hard.
Yeah. I'm like, it's the spirit of it, right? Like, I
Mm,
want to buy less. I think I do ultimately buy less, like in the last year or so, because I did kind of commit to being less like hoardy.
mhm,
That's a hard
yep,
thing to say. Less hoardy with it. And just like if I don't have a specific reason for it, don't buy it. But there are sometimes a print or two that'll just get me and I'm like, God damn it, I have to have it.
right. I I do think also with the 2020 2021 like time period, I certainly lost track of um I lost track of how much stuff maybe I was purchasing online because it was so easy.
Oh yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I have I have cut that way back.
Mhm.
Sorry guys, but um, I'm trying very hard not to purchase anything I don't have to.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have like a print or like an animal or something that will like show up in fabric that will 100% get you every time?
Not every time, but quite often, if I find something that is not necessarily a print, but if it is something that is super duper interesting and is very bright,
Mm,
I like almost everything that I've purchased in the last couple of years has been kind of really bright colors. I default to Tula Pink as my kind of like palette,
yeah,
but it's not just Tula Pink. Like there's a bunch of people that are producing those really fun bright colors now.
yeah.
So if I see something that is interesting that I haven't seen really done before,
Mhm.
then I will purchase them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that novelty of like, "Ooh, I haven't seen this yet." Because
right,
sometimes s I as much as I love, modern fabric and the designs that come out, sometimes it's like things can feel very similar as far
right,
as like the tones of colors that they're putting in their designs or just the type of designs and not intentionally. Obviously, I don't think
right.
anybody's out there copying each other, but it just may seem like the cycle of what's on trend or like what's like inspiring to people can kind of fall in line sometimes. So
Yeah, yeah, I find especially within, like, fabric producers, um, certain fabric producers have a very kind of clear aesthetic,
mhm,
um, and every line that they put out in that year has the same kind of color scheme,
mhm,
which is great if you are mixing and matching, but
right.
it can get really boring.
Mhm,
So I try to mix all of that up. I try to um, do a lot of things that are interesting. I also try not to buy fat quarter bundles anymore. Not that I don't
mhm.
have 150 of them,
Yeah.
um, but I do. I have this past couple of years taken a lot of steps to try to mix and match from different lines as well to keep things more interesting. With that said, the one I'm working on right now is 100% Libs Elliot. Like,
Oh, yeah.
um, just it's just beautiful. So
Yeah.
I bought the whole the whole line, and
Yeah.
it's all going into a quilt. But
Perfect. But there's some bundles that you just like you need every print of the
mhm,
whole line and it's non-negotiable.
right,
I've been that way with for a few. Like I've talked about it several times on here because it's like my first kind of big step into like Quiltstagram, and it was at like 2020 like Katerina Rochella was
mhm,
asking for testers and I love dinosaurs. It's just if you know me, you know I like dinos. And her Esoterra line is the dinosaurs and the florals in her gorgeous, painting style of art.
mhm,
And um I bought the half yard bundle of every print and I bought the yardage of one of the prints as backing. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm making. I just know I need to have this.
right,
And so when she was calling for testers for her Travaya quilt pattern, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have this line. I'm going to use it." And it was perfect. And but yeah, I needed and I've been using every scrap and I kept making other things with it and trying to find other ways to use it. And my mom made a bunch of stuff and we're like down to just like little tiny bits of squares and but it's like I'm happy that I've used it and I've mixed and matched it with some of her other stuff because
mhm,
her lines can blend so well together
right,
because she's so mindful of that. But anyway, I'm right there with you.
yeah.
But um what was the question that just popped in my head? Okay, yeah. So when you were a kid learning to sew, like were you immediately like, oh, this is a thing for me? Or did it take some time like working with it as a kid, as a youngster to like build your skills and then feel like, oh, this is a hobby for me? Or did you get, where your brother's like, oh, that's not for me? Like, yeah, like what was that
Yeah.
like?
So I learned how to sew a little bit. I was 11 or 12 years old. And then I think it was middle school, we had to take like
Mhm.
a home it's not really home economics, but it's that kind of class where
Yeah.
you learn a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And so one of the sections was sewing, and so I had taken what I learned there and was the first one done with my sweatshirt and
Mhm.
then my sweatpants. And so I was like, oh, this is not bad. I kind of like this. I kind of dig this. But then you go to high school and I grew up in a very conservative, a
Mm,
very conservative small town in northern Vermont, where boys don't sew.
mm,
So I didn't sew for several years until I was probably 21 or so after that, by
okay.
the time I picked up sewing again, and that was because I was poor and I wanted I wanted to make cool things and I wanted to wear cool things, and I did not have money for such things. But at the time, I don't know if this is a reference that people outside of the Northeast have, but Ames was a department store that had a fabric section, and it was kind
Oh,
of a northern New England um, place. So, and you could get fabric from the department store fairly cheap, from that
okay.
department store fairly cheap. So, um, that's what we did, or that's what I did.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
It's
Walmart came out with theirs
yeah, way cheaper, right?
way cheaper.
Well, it's wild to me that like, because my dad's mom, like she always sewed and she would always make stuff for me or makes things for herself or doll clothes, but she would always talk about how it was less expensive to get the quality fabrics and make your own, you know, school clothes and whatever. And so it was kind of, looked down upon if you made your own clothes
Mhm.
but now, then it became kind of popular to make your own clothes
Right.
but it's not the same because apparel fabrics are more expensive and, the nice like, they had their five options of fabrics and that was it. Whereas we've
Hmm.
got a plethora of options and a lot of it is that synthetic. And so the natural fibers like cotton and wool are more expensive to acquire than they used
Right.
to be. So it's kind of like that catch 22 of like such a cool skill to have. I'm just very for the first time making my own pants and I'm very excited about it. And I just got like a linen cotton blend from
Hmm.
like Robert Kaufman and I'm like, yeah, but 14 if I need, this much yardage and then all the time, I'm like, clothes are expensive.
Right.
Like the time to money ratio doesn't work out. So,
Yeah, and I do think if I were that age today, I would not be making clothing, because I would not be able to afford the fabrics that I would want. And fast fashion is, it's $7 for a t-shirt, and
mhm,
you can get a pair of shorts for 12,
mhm.
um, and it's disposable, sure, but
Yeah, yeah, it's tough, but I do like my youngest stepson, he is a thrifter, so he
mhm,
always finds really cool things at the thrift shop. And if he doesn't like the way something fits or he wants it to look a certain way, he's like gotten enough sewing skills because I taught him to kind of figure things out or to make them how he wants them and give it longer life than, just watch it rot in the thrift store. So
right,
I'm like, I guess that's probably like it'd probably be worth finding like a higher quality piece in a secondhand store and tailor it to yourself than even if you paid a tailor for it, it would still be
right,
cheaper than buying the garment new and then still also having to try to tailor it to yourself because obviously clothes don't just fit right off the rack either. So that's a whole different topic
right.
for a different day.
Yes. I could talk about, I mean, so I think there's probably 5 or 6 books over there about fitting shirts and
Mm,
fitting pants and whatnot, because it's also, if you do it, it's something that you're constantly learning.
mhm.
Um, things are evolving, things are changing, fashions change. So sometimes fitting a shirt is different than, and your body changes. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, but it was fun growing up with my mom sewing because she would make me stuff all the time, and I was too scared to use the sewing machine for my whole life pretty much because I didn't start quilting till I was like 31. So,
Okay.
and it took my best friends like basically hog tying me and making me pick out fabric, and no, I'm just kidding. It wasn't that hard to get me to do it, but um yeah, she was like, "Oh, now you wanna sew?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do."
Hmm.
So, it's like, I always love to hear people's experiences of getting into it because, like you, learned so young and then took had a big gap and then picked it up again, whereas I never really like, I sorta learned to sew a straight line, but I couldn't thread a machine. I didn't really know how the bobbin worked. Like,
Hmm.
I couldn't just, like, sit down and do something myself. Like, I always needed my mom's support, and so when I finally started learning the skills and figuring it out, I was like, "Oh, this is actually, like, pretty badass." Like, I can't believe I
Yeah.
didn't pick this up sooner. So
I kind of kick myself a little bit for not doing quilting earlier than my late early mid 40s.
mm,
Um, I wish I had. I think, I imagine kind of the amount of skills that maybe I didn't learn, um, that I could have picked up way earlier.
mm. Are you fed up with your sheets just not feeling as luxurious as you want while also being durable? Well, look no further. I'm partnering with Cozy Earth and they make the sheets of your dreams. I have been sleeping on my bamboo sheet set all summer, and I have to tell you, I am never going back. The bamboo sheets are made with 100% premium viscose from bamboo, and they are so breathable, you'll sleep a few degrees cooler. And who doesn't want less sweaty nights? The fabric also has an enhanced weave that won't pill wash after wash, and they're guaranteed for 10 years. All that, and they are so soft and sleek, you'll feel like you're at a high-end luxury hotel. And now you can elevate your own space by going to cozyearth.com and using code GRANNIES for an exclusive discount for up to 40% off your purchase. And if you receive a post-purchase survey, be sure to say that you heard about Cozy Earth from this podcast, and they'll send you a free pair of socks. So if you're ready to upgrade your nights and transform your days, head to cozyearth.com and don't forget to use code GRANNIES, that's GRANNYS, for up to 40% off your purchase. Did you feel a sense of like earlier on before your, mid to late 40s when you started quilting, like did it feel like a sense of maybe societal pressure to not get into that kind of thing or to not
Yeah.
show that you had interest in that thing, like in
Um,
quilting?
yes, a little bit. I think,
Okay.
there is not I think when you get into kind of the quilting world, you actually see a lot of the different types of people who are quilting, and it is kind of a really broad spectrum of people.
Mhm.
But from the outside looking in, what you see, or in my experience, what you see are not necessarily a broad spectrum of people who are quilting. The people that you see, are generally older white women who maybe, a 35-year-old gay guy with, at the time, purple hair probably didn't fit into
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
So some of that, yes. Some of it, though, honestly, was, in my 30s. I was much more career driven than
Mm.
I am today. Um, I was really focused on moving up a corporate ladder, and getting a little bit, getting a little bit of recognition in doing that in the companies that I worked for, and really trying to build that career.
Hmm.
And then by the time I was like early 40s, that um, honestly was killing me. I had a heart attack,
Oh no.
and which was a kind of a real big like, dude, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Um, like
Yeah.
you're 40. Um, and so it was what was a day or two after Thanksgiving that year. Um, and it was one of those kind of like earth shattering, like you you could totally die, and
Yeah.
the only thing that you've lived for the last 15 years has been going into the office and putting in 60 hours a week and doing those things and being that person.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to be that person anymore. And so, so some of that aspect was kind of freeing.
Hmm.
There's a picture of me on my 40th birthday, because I guess, yeah, that was probably about 6 months later, 6 months after I'd had the heart attack. So I was 39. There's a picture of me on my 40th birthday, like at the beach in Maine. Like I got up, I went down to the beach for sunrise. Like I took a whole bunch of pictures down at the beach, just to kind of mark the occasion of, all right, I'm not doing this anymore, but
Hmm.
what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
Um, and you have to work, like you need to make money, but you don't have to kill yourself to do it. And you, especially not being happy doing it. Um, so that
Yeah.
happened.
Wow. That's a lot. That's intense. Oh, I'm glad you're okay. That's crazy. Like,
Yeah, no, it's lovely. You know, I've fluctuated a little bit in weight and health since then, but I'm a far happier person than I was, and I'm a far more well-rounded person than I was. So,
yeah. It's it's wild how much balancing things out can make such a difference and like how your happiness level with
mhm,
what you're doing can affect so many other areas in your life. And I mean, I didn't have a heart attack, but I used to get eczema really bad covering my hands. Like my
mm.
fingers would just be completely broken out, cracked, bleeding all the time. And my students would always be like, "What is wrong with your hands, Mrs. Oros?" And I'm like, "Let me tell you, it's a little thing called eczema." And they would usually just like whatever, but it's like anytime I'd like, put my hands near their papers or whatever, I could see them just like staring at my fingers. And I was like so embarrassed. And my husband called them my zombie nugs. Because he's just like, I just don't know how to help you. And I'm like, I don't know how to help me either. But like just the stress levels
Mhm.
and just feeling like I was stuck or lost, like this isn't really where my head is at or my heart is at. And it was a really hard decision to leave. But I'm like, oh, so many health things have cleared up for me
Right.
since then. And priorities shifted and things have just changed around. I'm like, oh, huh, interesting.
Yeah, it is amazing what stress can do to your body. Like
Mhm,
just the things that your body will put up with, but it just comes out in some way, in some
mhm,
form.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where things like quilting or sewing, a hobby
Mhm.
should come in and help that process, but sometimes I think it can be a little tricky because of like the keeping up with the Joneses kind of social media
Right.
appearance that people are doing a lot more than they actually are and like or maybe they are doing so much but they're killing themselves to do it and so it's like kind of that feeling of well I need to be making more quilts or I need to be sewing more because this person seems to be sewing all the time when really they probably just like filmed themselves for an hour a bunch of different content clips and like makes it look like it's been happening over this certain period of time but
Right.
like how do you like do you find yourself falling into that And then if you do, how do you combat that for yourself?
Absolutely, I fall into that. Absolutely. I see and I see people kind of like producing or seemingly producing a whole bunch of content or producing a whole bunch of quilts and
Mhm,
really like kind of always having that thing. And for a little while, I probably was posting on TikTok probably once a day or
mm,
more, with new content and trying to get that out there. And TikTok is really easy to produce a lot of content in a very short period of time.
mhm.
Not all of it is quality. Don't judge the early TikTok stuff, please. But it was very easy to kind of do that. What became harder was to keep making new and interesting content,
Mm,
um, things that I haven't done a lot of before and whatnot. So when I would see people producing a lot of content, to kind of come out of that little aspect of maybe I'm not doing everything I should be doing. I will also go back and look at some of their older stuff and are they repurposing,
mm,
which is something that I have mad respect. Like repurpose all the stuff you can. Like
yeah,
do it. You
yeah.
should. Um,
Mhm,
but are they repurposing? Am I only seeing this through the lens of, maybe they've been doing this for 6 months where I've been producing kind of TikTok content for 3 years.
mhm.
Um, and it's easy to do 6 months of brand new stuff you've never done, but once you get to a certain point, it's harder to come up with new ideas and new ways to talk about something. So I do try to limit the amount of self, I guess, disparagement that I feel,
Mhm.
for some of that. Um, but it happens. I think it happens to all of us who put ourselves out there in that creative way, not just in the quilt making, but in the making of video content or podcast content or
Yeah,
any of those things. Like if you put a product out into the world, it's hard not to compare that product to what other people are doing.
yeah, yeah, definitely. It is hard to keep thinking of new things and to sometimes feel like reinventing the wheel. Like, haven't
Mhm.
60,000 other people made this same exact content? But it's like, yeah, well, you should still do it because then what if somebody clicks on yours? It's like, if it's trending and then they see yours, it's like, okay, yikes.
Right.
It's
But
hard.
it is also, and so I had put that post out on Instagram or Threads or something where I was like, do I want to make a podcast?
Mhm.
And I do. It's something I've been thinking about really for like a year. Like, is there a point of view like mine that is currently out there? And I
Mm.
don't know if there is. I haven't found it yet. Um, but there are also 100,000 other people putting out content. So am I going to do something brand new? And somebody wrote on that post like, yeah, do you have to do it
Yeah.
if it's something that you're feeling strongly about, you have to do it. But also nobody else has your point of view. It doesn't matter who you are, you
Yeah.
have a unique point of view. um, just put it out there and maybe you get two people to listen, maybe you get 100 people to watch something.
Mhm.
um, Maybe you get that video. I had that one video last year that like reached 300 and some odd thousand views where maybe that happens and
Yeah.
yay, that happens. And you make 200 bucks off of TikTok. Woohoo.
Yeah.
Um, but it's all it's all relevant. There's a point of view for all of it. So
Yeah.
I think putting it out there, teaching somebody how to make a half square triangle in a way that is not the same as what maybe somebody else taught them how to do.
Mhm.
I think all of that is valid. It's
Yeah.
just all work. Um,
No, I think I was in the same boat. I creating this podcast was like it was a touch and go back and forth kind of thing for a while, and then finally my husband was like, "I think you should just do it." Like, you have your perspective, you're a younger quilter, and I mean, now that I'm getting closer to 40, it's not the same, but I'm in that millennial kind of burst of, 2018 quilters that
Mhm.
came on the scene, and things are changing. And I think a lot of us, not just, millennial white girl like me, want to see changes in in the quilting community. And
Right.
every like whoever said that, congratulations on you. I agree with you. Like, not a single other person has your exact perspective, because you're a unique human and your experiences shape who you are, and nobody else has that. So I say go for it. I'm all
Yeah.
here. Like, there's enough room, and I've said it before, and I will keep saying it because I truly 100% believe it. There's enough room for all of us. If there's
Right.
8 billion people on this planet, there's enough space for you to have a podcast, for me to have a podcast, for your weird neighbor with 50 cats to have a podcast, like whatever, like anybody can do it. And you're going to find your crew, you're going to find your people that that your story resonates with.
Right.
And um I just recently, right before I left on my little European summer whatever, um reached over 1,000 YouTube subscribers. And that was like something I was really pushing for in 2024. And it happened.
Mhm.
And it was so great. And it was thanks to um Becca over at So Becca. She
Yes.
really helped. She got me on one of her lives and was really pushing that for me to help me out. And that just was like, this is why I love the quilting community. Like
It's
99%
true.
of us are so cool, and we're all here for each other and have each other's backs. And like
Mhm.
that's the kind of community I want. And
I
you'll
yeah.
your people will find you.
Your people will find you. Yeah, I love Becca. I love Becca.
Yeah.
I met her for the very first time at this last QuiltCon,
Mm,
and I don't know if she was at the Atlanta one or not. But when I went to the Atlanta one, like I went as like this little shy person. I was kind of walking around and talked to a couple of people. But at this last QuiltCon, like I made it in a priority to try to meet some of the people that were there, and um, I didn't actually say anything to her. Like I sat next to her at a table
yeah. You're
and was
like,
like, "Hi,
cool.
I'm Todd." But I wasn't like, "Oh my god, I follow you."
Yeah.
And then Scott Cully said to her, "Oh, this is the Bear Quilter."
Mm.
Um, and she was like, "Oh my god, I totally know who you were." And I was like, I
That's
love that.
exciting.
So
Yeah.
it was so exciting. It was so nice. But I also realized how lovely almost everybody that I met there was.
Mhm.
Um, there are just so many lovely people that you get to meet through quilting that I had no idea that would be a journey that I got to go down. So I was
Right.
super happy to meet her, but meet everybody through that journey. Who knew?
Yeah. It's it's something else. It's so funny because like my husband and I talk about it quite often, just like he's like, did you even know, like if your 30-year-old self could like look at this now, like, did you have any clue then that this is how quilting would be? I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I just thought, oh, my mom makes stuff. Like, she never really quilted until about 2 years before I did, or before I started, but she's always sewn. And so I've always been kind of in the sewing space. Like, I've always
Mhm.
known about things, but the quilting world is just so different. It's its own beast, which I
Mhm.
love because it's like we're fangirling over fabric designers.
Right.
It's like there are celebrities, and it's just it's funny, like not funny, haha, but just kind of like interesting how, your hobbies and when you niche in, and like how focused you can get on the different like aspects of the quilting world, because there's so many things under that umbrella, right?
Mhm.
And just like what strikes your fancy, what part of the quilting process do you dig in and find so fascinating, and who are your people in that lane? And
Right.
um it's just so fun to see, like, what parts different people hang on to. Like I fell in love with the long arming, and I mean, I'll piece and I like to sew, but put a quilt on a frame and I'm like, yes, I'm happy, happy girl. So it's just funny what pops out when once you've done one start to finish the whole way through, like what sings to you almost, right?
Right, right. Never binding.
Never
Um,
binding. Never binding.
never
Oh my
binding.
God, binding can go to hell. Oh,
I, I, it, and that is the one process that got me into quilting. Like it was the one thing where I was like, I need to figure out how to do this, how to finish this thing.
right.
And which is the YouTube rabbit hole that I went down and came out like 13 hours later. Um,
With your eyes as spirals.
right, right. Um, but it will never be binding. I used to pay I would quilt it myself on my domestic and then bring it to the long armor for them to put the binding on
Yeah,
because I hated it so much. And I was like, I will just give you $30. I don't care.
right.
Um,
Yeah. No, and that's so funny because like as a long armor and a quilt maker, like for hire, like it's a process I can't avoid.
right,
If it's on my own quilt, it will sit in the closet with binding attached but not finished for sometimes years because I'm like, can't fucking touch it. I don't
right.
want to look at it. I'm sick of it. I hate it. And then,
This quilt right here,
uh-huh.
that quilt right there, that is 4 years old, still no binding. It's been
See?
done for 4 years, no binding.
Well, do you torture yourself with hand finishing or do you do it all by machine?
Hells to the no.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
I will only hand finish it. I will only hand finish it if it already belongs to somebody
Mhm,
and that's what they have requested, and then I will
mhm,
sit down and I will do the hand finishing. Otherwise, I'm gonna quilt based that or glue based that binding
mm.
on with my iron, so I don't even have to use pins or clips because I hate those.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'll just machine sew that down. I'm not, if it's for me or just something that I'm making, I'm not spending the time to hand sew.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awful. I can't. It's the squirrel, it's the ADHD brain. Like I can't, I
Mhm.
gotta do something else. It's like I'll procrastinate and procrastinate. And then I'm like, oh, I have to like get this thing in the mail tomorrow. So I'll like
Right.
stay up until 2 a.m., finishing a binding if it's a hand one.
Yeah.
But most of the time clients are okay with machine finishing because they're just like,
Yeah.
what's gonna last longer? And I'm like, machine, machine.
Machine. Machine. It's also, I mean, I'm not a fabulous hand sewer either.
Mm,
So I can hide a stitch most of the time, but
yeah,
you're gonna see it and it's not gonna look great.
yeah,
Everybody else is much happier if I machine bind.
right. Well, and you can't beat like the crispness you get from glue basting
Right.
because it just holds it exactly in place and you don't have to fudge around with it.
Right.
It's just so nice. So,
Yes. Yes. Glue basting was a game changer. I started using glue on the binding 3 years ago or so,
mhm.
and just game changer.
Yeah, it's so nice. So, so nice.
Yeah.
It's wild the difference and just how much more quickly you can get through the binding of a quilt. No, it's already in place. You just have to stitch it down, like the
Right.
end.
Yeah. And literally goes from a couple of hours to like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Done.
So nice, especially on larger quilts. Like that's the thing that always will get me is like I'll get to the end of a quilt job and I'm like, okay, this is a king size quilt and I have to bind it now.
Mhm.
And I've already done all this, the harder stuff, piecing the quilt, getting it on the long arm, quilting it out, squaring it up. Squaring king size quilts is the thing that will probably put me in the grave, but that's all right. Um, so anything to make the binding easier is
Mhm.
like, just tell me what to do.
Yes. Yes.
It's a lot.
It's I often compare my ability to focus to my Boston Terrier's ability to focus. Like it's
Not good.
That
Not good.
I would
Uh,
love to do more, but no.
yeah. Mm, this is what I got.
Mhm.
Oh my God, that's so funny. I want to know what what upcoming projects do you have that you're like so excited to work on?
Yeah, so I'm currently working on the Libs Elliott quilt,
Yeah.
which I started actually in like March, and then I put it down. I put it in timeout for a little bit because I had a whole bunch of stuff that I needed to focus on.
Mhm.
Um, just various like things that I had agreed to do, and then the nonprofit, the LGBTQ bowling tournament, not nonprofit stuff, which took up really the last 3 months of my life has been mostly focused on doing that. Um, and so I'm just getting back to that. That is a pattern that I am writing that I'm hoping to release here in October, and do a sew along for on TikTok at the end of the year, beginning of the year. Um, so I'm excited to get back into that and get that done and get that pattern completely written. I've been talking to a couple of other quilters on the Instagram about doing some collab work, so we're starting um, that process, which will be a lot of fun. I've never collaborated on a quilt with anybody before, so it will
Mm,
be a new and interesting experience.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, that stuff. And then ideally there will be, so I have a website,
Mhm.
which right now I just have kind of some bare quilter merch, but ideally in October there will also be fabric for sale on the website, and some notions and that kind of stuff, mostly to support the idea of doing quilt alongs,
Mhm.
not to actually be a fabric store, but to be able to have people make the same thing that they see me making.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I mean, because sometimes you're like, no, but I want the exact thing that you're doing. I want mine
Right,
to look like yours. So unless you can sell them that exact kit and those exact tools, like
right.
it's like, oh, you're on your own, kid.
Well, and a lot of the fabric that we end up using is seasonal, right? So,
Mhm.
um, you know, while you can try to go and get the same fabric, you may or may not be able to get the same stuff.
Right.
Um, it may not be available in the area,
Mhm.
um, it's a one print or one kind of print line, and
Yeah.
the producer didn't do any more.
Yeah.
Um, so being able to kind of get at least a few kits together for people who want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's nice. I love being able to buy a kit, especially for so long. I think it's worth it. And I think a lot of people like the ability to buy kits because it like relaxes that piece of the process.
and finding fabric is stressful.
Hmm.
Like finding the perfect thing for the perfect thing
Hmm.
is stressful. And I've definitely purchased fabric. I've definitely bought the pattern and purchased fabric separately,
Hmm.
only to find that the fabric did not work in the way that I thought it might work in the
Yeah.
quilt. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that we can get something going for that. Um,
Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye out for it
yeah,
because that will be a glorious thing. And yeah, I'm excited. I hope you really do start your podcast because I will be a listener. And I think, like, again, everybody's perspective is unique and you never know who else might come out of the woodwork to be a supporter or just be a fellow person who can relate to your experiences
right,
until you put it out there. And although you make social media content, that's a very different platform than sitting down and talking about specific topics or talking to people. So
right.
I hope you do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. I have a whole iPhone notes list of things that I'd been thinking about over the last year. So some
Good.
voice memos and all of that stuff.
Great.
Conversations that I had with myself in the car. Um,
Yeah, that's good. Well, if
yeah,
you need
yeah.
anything, I'm here. You can always ask. I don't have a super fancy setup, but I can at least give you some quick tips and,
Mhm.
answer some questions if you have any, but
Yeah. I feel like in today's with today's technology,
mhm,
um, we can do anything.
honestly. Yeah. Well,
Yay.
so exciting. Thank you so much for joining me today. And
Absolutely.
thank you for sharing some of your story with me and with the listeners and just being willing to be here.
Absolutely. I was thrilled to do it, and I can't wait to talk to you again at QuiltCon in person where you don't run away from me.
Yeah, I won't run away. I promise this time. Now that I've talked to you, I won't feel like such a weirdo.
Are you going to Phoenix?
Yeah,
Okay.
I still haven't gotten any passes or tickets because when I was trying to get them last week, it wasn't working for me. And so I need to like actually sit down and go in. But I do have a hotel room. So
That's good. I did not get a hotel room. I ended up in an Airbnb because by the time I was booking, like it was like huge amounts of money for the hotels.
mm,
Um, but
yeah.
it's fine. It's fine. But I'll be there.
Yay. Okay. Well then yeah, we'll definitely meet and hang out in person because I will be less intimidated and it'll be better.
Awesome.